Against Empathy, The Case for Rational Compassion by Paul Bloom is a provocative, meticulously argued book that challenges one of the most cherished virtues in human morality, empathy. At first glance, the title alone feels almost offensive. Who could possibly be against empathy? But Bloom, a psychologist at Yale, makes the case that empathy, as commonly understood and celebrated, often leads us astray. Instead, he proposes a better guide to moral decision-making, rational compassion, deliberate, thoughtful concern for others that isn't hijacked by immediate emotional resonance. The book opens by differentiating between empathy and compassion. Empathy, Bloom argues, is the act of feeling what another person feels, essentially putting yourself in their shoes emotionally. Compassion, by contrast, is caring about others' well-being without necessarily mirroring their emotions. Bloom asserts that while empathy might feel morally virtuous, it is often biased, myopic, and inconsistent. He draws from psychological studies, real-world examples, and moral philosophy to show that empathy tends to direct our attention to individual, emotionally evocative cases while blinding us to larger, more pressing systemic issues. One of the key ideas Bloom explores is the narrowness of empathy. Our empathetic responses are strongest when we are faced with a single identifiable victim. Think of a photo of a suffering child rather than a statistic about thousands of children. This emotional pull leads us to overreact to individual cases and underreact to larger, abstract problems. It's why a single tragic story can launch a massive charity campaign, while ongoing global crises may barely register. Bloom contends that this misalignment between emotional response and actual need leads to poor policy and skewed moral judgments. Throughout the book, Bloom discusses the concept of spotlight empathy, the tendency of empathy to illuminate certain people while leaving others in darkness. This spotlight is easily manipulated by media, politics, and personal bias. We empathize more with people who look like us, speak our language, or share our background. This selective attention can lead to tribalism, injustice, and even cruelty, as our empathy for one group fuels anger or indifference toward others. Bloom argues that empathy is not a universally good force but a tool, one that can be used for good or ill, and often leads to partiality rather than fairness. In particularly striking chapters, Bloom shows how empathy can motivate harm. For example, in criminal justice or foreign policy, empathy for victims can lead to harsh, retributive punishment that overlooks rehabilitation or root causes. Politicians often stoke empathy for our group to justify aggression toward outsiders. In intimate relationships, too, an over-reliance on empathy can result in burnout or emotional enmeshment, rather than effective care. Bloom emphasizes that while empathy can feel good, it doesn't always do good, and feeling someone else's pain isn't the same as helping them. The book doesn't argue that empathy is inherently evil or useless, but that it is unreliable as a moral compass. Bloom acknowledges that empathy has a role in close relationships, between parents and children, lovers, or friends, where emotional resonance builds intimacy. However, when it comes to making large-scale moral or policy decisions, he insists that we must rely on principles, reason, and evidence, not our emotional gut reactions. Rational compassion, he argues, allows us to care with clarity, without being overwhelmed by feelings that cloud judgment. Bloom challenges the popular view of empathy in modern culture, particularly how it is treated in education, therapy, and political discourse as a cure-all for social ills. He critiques thinkers like Brené Brown, who advocate for empathy as the cornerstone of connection, arguing that such approaches overlook the cognitive biases and limitations empathy carries. Bloom's tone is not dismissive but precise. He respects the emotional appeal of empathy but refuses to equate it with moral virtue. One of the book's most compelling arguments is that empathy is often self-centered. When we empathize, we are essentially imagining ourselves in someone else's situation. Not truly understanding their experience, but filtering it through our own lens. This egocentricity, Bloom argues, can distort how we respond to others' suffering. Rather than acting out of objective concern, we act out of a desire to alleviate our discomfort at witnessing pain. In this way, empathy becomes more about us than about them. Bloom provides numerous examples from psychological experiments, history, and literature to support his claims. He references the work of philosophers like Peter Singer, who argue for effective altruism, giving in ways that maximize benefit rather than emotional reward. Bloom aligns with this perspective, suggesting that a rational, data-driven approach to compassion can lead to better outcomes, whether it's in how we donate money, shape public policy, or navigate ethical dilemmas. Importantly, Bloom anticipates the backlash his argument might provoke. He addresses potential criticisms head-on, such as the worry that rejecting empathy leads to cold-hearted utilitarianism or moral detachment. He clarifies that he is not advocating for apathy, but for a more reliable form of care, one that involves moral reasoning, respect for others' rights, and attention to outcomes, not just feelings. In his view, reason and emotion are not enemies, but empathy often hijacks reason in misleading ways. In later chapters, Bloom explores how this approach can be applied in real-life settings, from parenting and teaching to politics and medicine. He advocates for training people in compassion that is grounded in ethics and perspective-taking, not simply emotional mimicry. He discusses how doctors and therapists can better serve patients by maintaining emotional boundaries, and how leaders can make fairer decisions when they prioritize outcomes over emotional persuasion. The book closes with a reflection on human nature and the kind of moral world we want to build. Bloom argues that the best moral choices come from balancing care and reason, not from indulging our emotional impulses. He calls for a shift in how we think about kindness, not as a feeling, but as a commitment to doing what is right, even when it doesn't feel emotionally satisfying. Rational compassion, he believes, offers a sturdier foundation for morality in a complex, interconnected world. Throughout Against Empathy, Bloom maintains a calm, clear, and often humorous voice. He doesn't seek to provoke for its own sake, but to open a deeper conversation about how we help others and why. He invites the reader to look past sentimentality and examine the hard questions of moral psychology. What do we owe each other? How do we make good decisions when the needs are many and our attention is limited? In the end, Bloom's message is not that we should feel less, but that we should feel smarter. By recognizing the limits of empathy and embracing a more thoughtful form of compassion, we can build a more just and effective moral world. His case may be controversial, but it is rooted in a profound respect for human dignity and a desire to help others not just emotionally, but wisely.